There is a civilization sitting at the root of European history whose founding population, according to the man who dug it out of the ground, arrived by boat from Egypt. That claim held for more than a century in textbooks, museum placards, and the origin story visitors were told standing among the ruins on the island of Crete in front of a palace with plumbing older than the pyramids of most people's imagination. Then scientists opened a cave in the mountains of that same island, pulled DNA from bones that had been sitting there for roughly 4,000 years, and the story that had explained the birth of Europe's first advanced civilization did not survive contact with the molecule. What the DNA actually said was stranger than either the old theory or its simplest replacement. This is the story of the Minoans, and it does not end where you expect. In 1900, the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans began excavating a low hill called Knossos on the island of Crete and uncovered the remains of a civilization nobody had documented before. A Bronze Age palace culture with plumbing, vivid frescoes, and a writing system so old it predates the Greek alphabet by more than 1,000 years. Evans named these people Minoans, after the legendary King Minos of Greek myth, and the civilization he uncovered was already famous for something unusual among Bronze Age powers. A coastal culture with no fortified walls, apparently protected by naval strength rather than stone. But Evans did not think this civilization originated on Crete itself. Studying similarities between Minoan art and Egyptian and Libyan artifacts, including a shared convention of dress in painted figures, he proposed that the Minoans were refugees who fled Egypt's Nile Delta after King Narmer's conquest and unification of Egypt around 3000 BCE. For decades, this North African origin story sat comfortably inside the field's understanding of how Europe's first advanced civilization began, an elegant, tidy line connecting one ancient power to the birth of another. The complication arrived in 2013, when a team led by geneticist Geoffrey Huey of Hartnell College and George Stamatoyiannopoulos of the University of Washington extracted mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed down only through the maternal line, and therefore one of the most reliable tools for tracing deep ancestry. From 37 skeletons recovered from a cave ossuary on Crete's Lassithi Plateau, radiocarbon dated to between roughly 4,400 and 3,700 years old. They compared the sequences against 135 ancient and modern reference populations from across the world. The result was not a minor adjustment to Evans's theory. It was a direct contradiction of it. Not one of the 37 Minoan samples carried the mitochondrial signatures characteristic of North African populations. The genetic evidence that was supposed to eventually confirm a century-old origin story instead erased it. But ruling out Egypt did not settle where the Minoans actually came from. It only opened the real question. Evans's Egyptian hypothesis was not baseless invention. Minoan art does share visual conventions with Bronze Age Egyptian and Libyan work, and the chronology, a native power emerging in the eastern Mediterranean not long after Narmer's unification of Egypt, appealed to archaeologists looking for a plausible mechanism of cultural transmission. But the mitochondrial data closed that door for a specific, testable reason. North African populations, ancient and modern, carry maternal lineages tracing back through sub-Saharan gene flow, and none of it appeared anywhere in the Lassithi sample. Resemblance in painted pottery is not the same thing as shared ancestry, and a genome does not know what a fresco looks like. It only records who someone's mother was. The Huey team's own data pointed the shared ancestry somewhere else entirely, overwhelmingly toward Europe, and most strongly toward the Neolithic farming populations of Anatolia and the Aegean who had reached Crete roughly 9,000 years earlier, part of the same wave of agricultural migration that carried farming out of the Near East and into the rest of the continent. On its face, that looked like the tidy replacement answer everyone wanted. It wasn't. In 2017, a team led by Iosif Lazaridis at Harvard Medical School, working with David Reich and Johannes Krause, sequenced whole genomes, not just the maternal mitochondrial line, from 19 ancient individuals: Minoans from Crete, Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, and their eastern neighbors in southwestern Anatolia. Whole genome sequencing reads the full inherited record from both parents rather than one lineage alone, and it showed that the simple story, pure descent from the first Aegean farmers, was itself incomplete. Roughly 3/4 of Minoan ancestry did trace to those Neolithic Anatolian and Aegean farmers, confirming the Lazaridis mtDNA result. But the remaining quarter came from somewhere the farmer-only model hadn't predicted: ancient populations related to the Caucasus and Iran, a signal meaning a later wave of movement out of the east had reached the Aegean sometime before the Bronze Age began, layering onto the farming population rather than replacing it. The clean two-option debate, Egypt versus simple local continuity, had never actually been the whole menu. The same study's deepest finding wasn't about the Minoans in isolation. It was about what made them different from their mainland neighbors. Mycenaean Greeks, whose warrior culture would eventually absorb Minoan Crete by the 15th century BCE, turned out to carry the same Anatolian farmer plus Caucasus foundation as the Minoans, but with one additional layer the islanders lacked entirely: ancestry from populations related to the hunter-gatherers of Eastern Europe and Siberia, introduced through either the Eurasian steppe or Armenia. That single genetic difference, present on the mainland and absent on the island, offered something the pottery and the frescoes never could: a testable explanation for why two cultures that shared religion, art, and eventually a script were never, genetically, quite the same population. Lazaridis summarized it plainly afterward: the ancestry of the first European farmers has proven remarkably persistent in Greece, he explained. But persistence never meant isolation, since at least 2 additional migrations reached the Aegean before Minoans and Mycenaeans existed at all, with further admixture layered on afterward. Greeks, in his words, have always been a work in progress, each migration adding to the record without erasing what came before it. There's a version of this finding that feels like a demotion, a proud singular origin story swapped out for something more tangled and harder to summarize on a museum placard. But consider what a genome carrying layered ancestry actually resembles. It isn't a wall painted once and left alone. It's closer to a manuscript copied and annotated across centuries, where a later scribe's notes in the margin don't erase the original text underneath. They sit alongside it, both real, both part of what the document has become. The Minoan genome carries a foundation of Aegean farmers who arrived 9,000 years ago, a second layer from populations further east who mixed in without wiping out what was already there, and, on Crete specifically, no trace at all of the Egyptian story that dominated the popular imagination for 100 years. None of those layers cancel the others out. A person discovering an unexpected branch in their own family tree rarely comes away feeling smaller for it. More often, they feel like the tree was always bigger than the branch they had originally been shown. None of this diminishes what the Minoans actually built. The plumbing at Knossos, the vivid frescoes, the still undeciphered script called Linear A, the trade networks reaching across the Mediterranean, all of it was built by the real descendants of Aegean farmers and Eastern migrants layered together over thousands of years, not by refugees from a foreign empire the way Evans imagined. If anything, the real story asks more of the people who built it, not a single ready-made culture transplanted wholesale onto an empty island, but a population that formed gradually on that island out of multiple ancestral streams and became distinct enough that a century of serious archaeologists mistook it for an import. That is the pattern this kind of research keeps turning up. On Crete and everywhere else, ancient genomes have been sequenced. No population is a single thread. Every one of them is a rope, twisted from strands that arrived at different times, and identity was never really a fixed point of origin to begin with. It was always a direction of travel. Here is the detail that rarely makes it into summaries of the 2013 study. The cave ossuary on the Lazaridis Plateau, where those 37 skeletons were recovered, sits in the same valley where people live today. And when Huey's team compared the ancient mitochondrial sequences against modern populations, the genetic overlap with current residents of that very plateau was higher than with almost any other population on the entire comparison list. 4,000 years, a total collapse of the palace civilization, and a complete cultural transformation later, some of the maternal lines from that one valley appear never to have actually left. The people who dismissed Evans's Egyptian theory were not just correcting a mistake about the distant past. They were reading a signature that had been sitting, unbroken, in the same ground the whole time. If there is a single thought worth carrying out of this, the past does not wait to be discovered so much as it waits to be asked the right question, in a language we only recently learned to read. If this changed how you picture Europe's first civilization, consider subscribing, since these origin stories keep getting rewritten faster than the textbooks can keep up. And if it is worth passing on to someone who still thinks the Minoans came from Egypt, a like helps it reach them. Tell me in the comments, if a DNA test told you your own family's founding story was only 3/4 right, would you want to know the rest?